Well, last week I was up north in the land of snow and icy cold wind,
Oh my goodness.
where people thought it was spring because it was 30 degrees. So I was up in Minnesota visiting my dear sister. And one of the things we got to do was go to an event in Minneapolis itself. And it was such a moving experience that I just wanted to share some of the things that I came away from this event. It was a fundraiser for the humanitarian efforts that are going on in Minneapolis because, while on one hand, people who are undocumented citizens are being, how would I say, are being treated legally as, from the point of view of government. At the same time, the entire immigrant community is terrified because it's how I say, it's possible that they could be identified as being undocumented when indeed they are naturalized citizens. So there is a great deal of extra effort going into getting these people, especially if they're dependent on food banks or that type of thing, getting them the extra help. So we went to a fundraiser, and this fundraiser was put on by a group of nationally known journalists and news people who came to Minneapolis to point out how they were showing the way to the rest of the world the value of peaceful resolution rather than burning down buildings and rioting and all of that sort of thing. And so when we went to this symposium, it was held in a great big theater. It was sold out for 2 nights in a row, and it gave people an opportunity to come in with all of their feelings. And it really sort of reminded me after 9/11. Because I have another daughter who lives in New York, I was in New York within weeks of when 9/11 happened. And you did not meet a person who did not have a story to tell. A moving story, a story of love, a story of loss, a story of tragedy. And it was the same way when I visited Minneapolis. But a very interesting thing happened. As this whole assembly began, people spilled out their feelings, and many expletives, and feelings of frustration and all of this. And at the very end of this evening with these journalists and so on, they said, we've been sharing our views on what's going on and our words of encouragement and so on. But now we're going to hand the microphone over to you in the audience. And we want you to talk about one of two things, just 1 or 2 sentences. And the sentence can either be about hate or it can be about hope. So they brought the microphone out into this audience and passed it around. And these were people who were just individual citizens who had to, go to work the next day, and had to bundle up in the cold, as some of them did, in order, as we did certainly. I had on a sweater, extra things. So they passed this microphone around, and people shared either things that they hated about the situation or things that they loved about the situation. And then the evening came to an end. It was a glorious evening. It finished up probably around 10:30 at night, and we're standing outside in that icy cold air. And my sister and I turned around and we realized something. We looked at each other and we said, do you realize that entire room shifted from this venting of negative emotion? Wow. And 99% of the people spoke about hope. Wow. Talked about how they admired their neighbors for what their neighbors were doing. They talked about the inspirational stories they heard. They talked about the teachers who drive kids home because the kids are afraid maybe their parents won't be home when they get there. I mean, just all kinds of incredible inspirational stories. And that whole room, the whole environment had shifted And it was such an incredible spiritual lesson. And that's what gave me the idea that I wanted to talk today about these two words, hate or hope. As spiritual practitioners, especially when you're trained to be a prayer practitioner in the Church of Religious Science, or the original church that was started by Reverend Ernest Holmes back in the 30s. Prayer practitioners who are trained to pray for other people and for other conditions. The biggest thing and the most difficult lesson that we are taught is to stop focusing on appearances and to look beyond appearances. So, for example, if we're praying for somebody who has cancer, we don't focus on the word cancer. We don't focus on that condition. Instead, we focus on the good, the healing, the blessings, the resources, the perfect answers for that particular situation, rather than focusing on the condition, which as human beings we all tend to do because it breaks our hearts to see somebody going through something else. And yet, when we come to prayer, instead of the condition, we need to look beyond that condition. And this is probably one of the most important things about the word hate. Hate focuses on the condition. And it locks us into condition. And it keeps us from being able to see new perspectives. Perspective is such a strange thing. It all comes from thought and what our awareness is and what we focus on. And as a perfect example, you saw me earlier talk about how cold it is in Minneapolis. Well, I want to tell you something. When it was 30 degrees, my sister was leaving the front door open with just with the sun shining in on that frigid air, which I would have slammed the door shut. Oh, it's spring-like today. We were standing on that sidewalk outside the theater in below freezing temperatures. Me with my coat zipped up to my ears. If I could have had earmuffs, I would have brought them. At the very same time, there was a concert going on down the street that all the kids were going to. I wish I knew which rock and roll band would have been there, but probably just as well I didn't, because I would have been torn. But anyway, they were going to a rock concert. I swear, multiple numbers of young ladies walking around in tiny skirts with their bare legs hanging out. For them, it was just another winter day. People just walking around in sweatshirts. I mean, it's just a different perception. And when we use the word hate, we're locked into a condition. And yet when we use the word hope, there's opportunities to realize that there's different ways of seeing things. None of us have the world is thousands of shades of gray. None of us have the self-righteous right to say, well, this is right and this is wrong. It's all shades of gray. And when we use that word hate, then we are locked into being victims, powerless. So, the first lesson that I really learned from this whole experience was that when we use that word hate, we don't open ourselves up to possibilities. The second thing that I really came away with as a metaphysical lesson is the power of collective consciousness. I mean, it was amazing in that room to see the entire consciousness shift from venting over to hope. Nobody stood up there and said, now, and preached to them like, I am to you. You should be choosing hope instead. That's what the Lord wants. It just happened. It just happened. And I think this is another reason for hope, is that when we focus on hope and when we open ourselves up to possibilities, we aren't just doing something for ourselves, we are opening up something larger than ourselves. And when we come together in community, we are doing something so powerful. Eckhart Tolle says this: a group of people Coming together in a state of presence generates a collective energy field of great intensity. It not only raises the degree of presence in each member of the group, but also helps to free the collective human consciousness. This is why we need to get together on Sundays, because when we come together and we focus on love and hope and peace, we are raising it for the rest of the world. It is one of the most powerful things that we can do. It is so easy in these times to sit by ourselves and to say, I'm just a poor little human being. What can I possibly do to help? I can't change anything. Yes, we can. By coming together and by choosing our words carefully and by practicing hope. A third thing. Sometimes people look at me, and I know my name is Pollyanna. And
It's a great name.
very easy to say, well, you're just positive Polly, and you're just naive, and it's just, all of this positive self-talk and positive stuff. It's just naivete. It doesn't really count. You're not dealing with reality. I say that hope and positivity, that is spiritual walking the talk. It's a discipline. It's not just a mood, it's not just a fleeting thing, it's something we really are called upon to practice in the way we speak each day, in what we focus on each day. It's not a mood, it is a discipline. It's the daily choice to align with love, to align with peace. And a wonderful place, a wonderful choice when we come together and practice it together, because then we are really amplifying that peace. So, what can we do? What is the best thing that we can do in this situation? First of all, if you feel great negativity coming up about a situation, instead of using the word hate, which just attaches us to the situation, start using the word angry. Because when we use the word anger, we take responsibility for our feelings instead of blaming other people. So to say, it makes me angry that this is happening or that is happening, that moves us into action instead of being attached to a situation we don't want. So we're taking responsibility instead of being rigid, instead of being filled with self-righteous anger, which the ego just loves. There's nothing better than self-righteous anger. So I'd like to share this prayer in closing because it means so much. It's from St. Francis of Assisi in the Christian tradition. Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. Divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive. It is in pardoning that we are pardoned. It is in letting go of self that we are born to eternal life. Every day, each one of us is handed a microphone, and we have a choice. What are we amplifying by our own actions? What are we amplifying to our own nervous system by what we say? What stories are we telling ourselves about what is going on in the world? What tone do we bring to our conversations with others? And what energy are we bringing into human consciousness? It's our choice, and we can choose hope. Thank you.